Hey there, friends. It's time for another Blazor Power Hour, and I have a special guest with me today, Kathryn from our DevRel team. How are you doing, Kathryn?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I thought I would take a show to chat about some CSS dev tips and tricks and things, and I thought I'd invite somebody that actually knows what they're doing with CSS on the show.
Oh man, and you ended up with what happened to the first three people you tried to invite.
So I've been working on a talk that I've been doing for Blazor developers to try to teach them a little bit about CSS and some of the more modern things that we can do with CSS. And you have a talk that you do something kind of similar, and you talk about new techniques for like responsive web design, stuff like that. And I thought it'd be fun to have you on to kind of bounce some ideas off each other.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we've got some.
I can talk about CSS forever, so I'm ready.
We've got some special folks in chat as well. Aztec Consulting is here. Aztec is going to be at DevReach with us, I think. So
Ooh, really?
That should be interesting. Yeah, he won a package with a ticket to DevReach. So
Nice.
we'll see some folks there as well. We'll see each other in Boston next week. Can you believe that's next week?
I cannot. Yeah, I'm flying up on Saturday, and so it's not even. It's like days away. I'm not there. I'll get there before I physically get there, but I'm not there mentally right now.
I've got so much going on, like outside of work
much
too.
to get
Like
ready.
it's like, oh my gosh. Like we have family coming to visit while I'm doing all of this as well.
Gosh.
My daughter's family is a military family, so they're redeploying and they're coming to visit. Like they're essentially homeless. Like they've been kicked out of their home and they are going to redeploy somewhere else. So they're living with us until their deployment starts. So
That's
unfortunately,
nice. Get a little time.
Yeah, we do get some time, but unfortunately, I won't see them for like 3 years after that because they're going to Japan. And yeah, it's going to be hard. But
it's a good excuse to go to Japan.
Yeah, I know, right? You get the all expense paid trip to Japan, but you have to join the Marines to do that. So
yeah,
there's some trade-offs
for
there.
some conferences, some Japanese conferences.
There you go. There you go. And Salt and Burnham is here. Chris DeMars, who is also going to be with us in Boston. In Boston by the harbor. We'll be there. So we were having this chat on Twitter yesterday.
I saw it, or rather, I saw.
You witnessed
I saw
the crash,
tweets, and I almost tagged you with them just to like start problems. But I decided not to.
It was a fun discussion, though. Like, from certain perspectives, I get where Chris is coming from. So the tweet, if you didn't catch the thread of rants that went on back and forth, it was Blazor is, in Chris's perspective, not a front-end technology because it uses C#.
Those are the most passive aggressive parts I've ever seen in my life.
So I think I summarized it well, is what he's saying there. But if you stick around, Chris, you'll see that the code that I'm working on has very little to do with anything .NET, C# or otherwise. I should probably share my screen so we can actually like look at some code. Yeah, so the discussion kind of went, I was trying to help kind of share some different perspectives, and it's like languages don't define a platform anymore. Like we have JavaScript like doing all sorts of non-traditional JavaScript things. Like JavaScript started, like I can tell some old man stories. Like it started as a language that the
can you put that back on the bigger size? Not to be that guy.
At 200. Okay, we'll go up to the old
are
people. Actually, let me try
blind.
fixing. Let's see here. I don't think I did
see
my
these videos?
pre-flight checklist here. I am on the wrong resolution. I should be matching this. So let's go down to 1080p here. No, that is not. It's not the right one. What did I pick? 1920 by 1080. Oh, there we go. There, that should help a little bit too. There we are. Now that's really loud.
That's
yeah.
Yeah.
So like, to make a long story short, like back in the day when they were designing browsers, like they were like, we're using Java on the server. We'll just use that in the browser. And then somebody was like, nah, that's too complex. Let's make something that's very simple that people can kind of, utilize without having to learn like this complex language. We'll just script some stuff because we're just clicking on buttons and maybe, I don't know, changing some stuff on the screen. And JavaScript was kind of adopted, probably from ECMAScript, if that wasn't even around at the time. So, it was meant to be simple, and like things got more and more and more complex over the years, to the point where now we're just like gone full circle. We're like, those server languages, or not server languages, but all, general purpose languages, let's just use those to do web development too. So we have like C# and Rust and all these things that can inject code through WebAssembly. And then JavaScript has gone like the opposite direction. It's like, okay, this simple language is now a complex language that we can use for machine learning and IoT and God knows what else, game development. So language doesn't define a platform anymore, Chris. I'm sorry. It's been a few years since we could say, well, JavaScript's that web browser thing, and C# is that, Windows platform only thing. And if we look at this project, we can see some of those familiar web things, right? And the project I'm working on here, for context, Kathryn, is it's a slide deck in its own right. So if I run it, and hopefully the theme comes through here.
I see. This is the conference talk thing that you were using for that. This is cool.
It'd be even cooler if it worked. I don't know what's wrong. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm going to live stream and then nothing goes right. So I'm getting some kind of error, and I'm not seeing the error. Like, I don't know. Some of the styles are working, but not all of them. So I'm trying to figure out where this went wrong. Like this, definitely there's an error, or no, there's not an error. It's the style sheet that hides the error message is missing.
You see this absolute flex. He's like, yeah. Cool. Enjoy your nerd crap. I'm on vacation.
Oh, man.
Later, skaters. He's out. He just came in to start an argument and leave.
He's like, wait, he's going to prove me wrong. I'm leaving. I'm out of here.
Have fun, man. I'm jealous.
So first thing is, I think we're going to have to figure out what's wrong with this, and then we can talk a little bit more about what it is. Let's see what's in the Git history here. So I have Sass in here, and it looks like my Sass theme built. So maybe the browser didn't pick it up. Let's try running this one more time and do like a hard refresh of all the assets, and maybe that will make it work. So we'll do the old empty cache, reload the page.
Turn it off and on again.
And still nothing. App CSS is here. Let's make sure there's stuff in it. Open in a new tab. There are things in there. So I've got my my theme settings in here, but there's still just something missing. trying to figure out exactly what it is. Let me try opening this one up. There's two CSS files here. One is just your traditional CSS. The other one is CSS Isolation, and this is something, if I think Chris is gone, but he would appreciate. There is a CSS Isolation technology in Blazor that is, it's kind of more acceptable to me than some of the other things that people use, like CSS and JS, which I do not like. Have you ever encountered that?
Yes. Yeah, it's just always this, you end up with this thing where it's like, yeah, the idea of CSS being completely separate from your JavaScript is the ideal, but often it's just not realistic. So we have 20 million ways of awkwardly attempting to solve that problem for when we need styles to interact with. In our case, the JavaScript, or in my case, the JavaScript. You're not writing in JavaScript, so. But I'm sure there's something equivalent.
That's something that I think is kind of weird. Like, we take the context away from the front end developer at that point and shift it to, you know, the dependency on that developer to know JavaScript. And it's like, well, maybe they're CSS developer that doesn't really specialize in JavaScript. And now you've just moved.
Has become so big now. I'm a big fan of Brad Frost's separation, the front of the front end and the back of the front end. Because I think that's effectively the problem you're touching on, is like people that consider themselves front of the front end are those like CSS specialists, and they probably know a fair bit of JavaScript, really, but not the kind of not necessarily the like complex application level JavaScript that is back end.
So this is baffling me right now. So it looks like all my CSS is here, but it's not being applied. So
it's bizarre. I don't know, to people watching, I've never seen this code before. I just long for the ride.
I know, that's the bad part. I have nobody to blame this on now.
I feel kind of bad because I'm just sitting here like, I'm here for moral support. I'm not troubleshooting, I'm not doing anything. I have no idea. I also don't write any Blazor.
I built this. So there's almost no Blazor in here, which is the funny part. So most of this is Sass code.
Okay.
And I'm actually looking at the wrong file.
Where's it being?
Open apps.css. You know what? Let's try this real quick. I'm going to open the www root folder in. So in a Blazor app, Kathryn, the www root folder, and I need to, there we go. This is where all of your static assets live. So like images, Sass or CSS files, that sort of thing. This goes in your www root folder. This is just the convention more than anything. It says this is where you're going to find all that static stuff, fonts and images, CSS, icons, you name it, goes in there. I have my app CSS file, which is like the main CSS for the application. That excludes like any of the component CSS. So like the components have their isolated. Yeah, this is definitely global stuff. So I can actually delete this safely because the CSS code is generated from Sass, which is in this folder over here that I called theme. You know, your personal opinions on that folder might vary, but I either call it theme or, you know, styles, or even just maybe Sass sometimes. So I have all my Sass stuff in there. And what's interesting about this presentation, you can see it totally obliterated the theme. And it live updated this, by the way. So you can see some of the CSS styling is still there, but it's the component level stuff. Like all the theme colors are gone. The font settings are gone. All the global stuff was just annihilated when I took that file out.
But it looks like you've got some kind of a grid or something going on at the component level, and that's still intact. So
in here, I can jump into my PowerShell, and in the command line, which I have to zoom in on, there we go, I can run Sass against this project, and it should just build it out. So I'll do npm run, and I have, in my talk that I give, I show several ways of setting Sass up. I don't know. I know you do some React, Kathryn. Like that's all like baked into React, isn't it?
What, setting up? But
like Sass is just part of the React pipeline when you create a new app.
Not necessarily. It depends on what you use. There's some stuff like create React app is the most common, like a way to just roll up a new application. And you can specify like I want to use Sass or I want to use TypeScript, but that stuff isn't in there by default. It's pretty easy to incorporate it though.
There we go.
Common part of the flow. Nice. What was wrong? I was too busy talking about React.
Oh no, I deleted the Sass and recompiled the Sass, and now it works.
Okay. Nice.
So Sass is still something I use quite a bit. I know it's pretty popular
Sass
here at Progress as well. We build all of our themes with it for Kendo UI and Telerik UI. So still very extensible, flexible, love it. It adds things to the language that we don't have. And this is something I was trying.
That margin's getting slimmer and slimmer. Things that vanilla CSS doesn't have anymore that Sass adds. It's just like mix-ins now, I feel like. I'm sure there's some other smaller stuff, but mix-ins are like their primary reason why I'll still opt for Sass.
Yeah, it seems like we're getting to the point where we're inventing new problems to fix. Like one of the things that they added to Sass that's fairly recent in my opinion is like the scoping thing that you can do. Okay. So you can do use now, and I'm saying now like this is brand new. I think it's been around for a little bit longer than I'm alluding to, but I just became aware of it not that long ago. Used to use I'm trying to remember the previous was it import?
Do you think they had to change that? Because yeah, that's the other thing that CSS and Sass have been kind of fighting on is as CSS adds new things to vanilla CSS, they'll start using keywords that might have been in Sass before, and then Sass has to scramble because import means something now in CSS and it didn't used to. So
yeah, you've always been able to import in CSS, but it was kind of frowned upon because the way HTTP handled it. And I'll look at that in a second because I still use that here. And I'll explain the difference, why it's acceptable now when it hasn't been forever. And I'm just looking at chat here as well. So Janescu says,
yeah, I think that was when we were talking about front end.
Who comes from XAML to get something. Yeah, it's a bit, there's some things that overlap in XAML and CSS that they use different terminologies for, but do the exact same things. And it kind of annoys me that like nobody could standardize on like one thing. So like XAML has a stack panel and CSS has Flexbox, which are identical in the way they operate, but they're called two different things, which is it's just
the XKCD comic on standardization. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Where they're like,
it's created
we need
our
to
own.
add one final way to standardize everything. Now we have 3 ways to standardize.
It's like one of the more modern things that Sass does uses this use statement, which gives you like scope. So you could say, I want to use this module as M, and now the letter M has the properties and functionality using like the dot syntax. So you can say module dot color to access its color, and it's scoped to that module now.
Because we're not quite here yet, but with Cascade Layers, we're like creeping in this direction with regular old CSS, which is so I find that immensely interesting.
Yeah, so cascading layers. Let's bring that up for a second.
I feel like did I say that in a contain? No, that was right.
Yep.
I feel like I messed up the name for a minute, but I was wrong.
We'll just go over to CSS tricks. So this is something I don't use in the presentation new. Because it's like brand new. Yeah. But I'm glad you brought it up because this is really cool stuff. So I'm trying to even remember how this works. Like I kind of glanced over this. Do you know a little bit more about it?
I played with it once. Alyssa and I played with it a bit on UI Mondays. I have not used it in anything kind of in production, quote unquote, yet. So I don't have any real world kind of examples. But basically it works actually very similar to how you might imagine like layers in a design document, you know, that kind of allow that.
Like a Photoshop or something like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really nice is the ability to add, it kind of adds that scoping the way we talked about, and also lets you kind of, it lets the developer have some control over that like prioritization hierarchy. See this, which used to just be like, you had control over the stuff within the CSS in terms of like IDs trumped classes and like stuff like that when it comes to determining the actual styles that are presented. But we had very little control over the order in which like the CSS files themselves. Like it all just got kind of like, and the browser made those decisions. This lets us say like, no, prioritize this style sheet over this style sheet, which is especially good for things like when you're dealing with a library or something, which I think is really nice because that's one of the things people grump about, right? Using a third-party library because it comes with styles that you may or may not want. And that can be a pain to overwrite. And so to be able to prioritize and say like, no, mine always should be prioritized over Kendo styles or whatever.
I like that you can like create a theme even and say like this layer is the theme layer, and that's where all of your theme stuff is going to be applied. Like this is really interesting that you can do this. Like you have these layers now that you can just kind of overlay onto your CSS code. But this is like have a much super more modern.
Yeah. It lets the developer have a much more like granular control over the order in which the browser will interpret your styles, which is very cool, I think, but also can lead to very complex styling situations. It's going to be something that's great for people building like big enterprise apps, I think, and probably something you won't need to touch if you're building your average kind of website.
And
2 cents.
It looks like the browsers are getting there, but they're not quite there yet. So that was one of the reasons I didn't tackle this in my talk.
I think they're there now. Maybe check Can I Use and see what it's at.
That would probably be a good idea. Let's see, when was this article written? Not that long ago. Updated February 22nd. So this is only like 6 months old.
Yeah. But things have been moving.
So if we go to Can I Use layer, cascading layers. Well, of course, IE, but
yeah, no, you're good in all your major browsers right now.
All right, let's rewrite the talk. It's all good then.
Done. Yeah.
So that's a thing. So it's similar to this modularization stuff that we do in Sass. In some ways, the syntax is quite different though.
Yeah,
the outcome is similar.
It's a little different, but yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about use from it. Like we used to use import all the time. Import is kind of like just give me all the things from this module, and it didn't scope it at all. It just kind of like injected it globally into the style sheet. And if we go over to my project and look at how I have it organized, actually I'm using use here. Let's see if app CSS or app. Yeah, I'm not using it in this. If I'm not using Sass, I use import here, and import is valid in CSS code. Without the @ symbol, I think it's just import.
Yeah, it's just import.
And then the URI from where you're getting that resource from. And I can't remember off the top of my head how to do it, but you could import it that way. And back in the day, HTTP1, what it would do, if we picture these use statements as traditional CSS import, as I accidentally close it, is they would go in order of source as a separate request. So it'd go out and it would fetch this resource and then this one and then this one and then this one and this one and so on, one by one by one. It would not do those in parallel. It would do them sequentially. And there was overhead associated with each request, not just the file size, but making that request took additional time and resources. So people really frowned upon this because it would slow your initial request down by like a really big amount, depending on how many files you're fetching. And it's like, well, you know, HTTP does this all the time, you know, fetches files and resources from everywhere. But for some reason, the import was really not efficient at this. So like that was complete garbage. Nobody ever used it. And they're like, this just slows your web page down so much, like avoid this at all costs. HTTP 2 came along and changed the way that resources are fetched. And now you can just throw those in there willy-nilly and it doesn't make a difference. So I'm all for just throwing them in as import statements if you're not using Sass. Like that is a perfectly legit thing to do now, which if you would ask me that like 5 years ago, I'd have been like, ick, don't do that. Like
CSS has been moving fast. I think that's really like probably why both of us have talks that are getting picked up by conferences, frankly. Is that in the last like five years, even the last like 3 years, we've seen huge changes in CSS, like big.
Like this code block here, for example.
Yeah, that's a major example. All those getting variables in vanilla CSS was like.
So variables in CSS, they technically, I always call them CSS variables, but they're not technically called CSS custom properties. Yeah. Which if you say custom properties, it like people like, what? And if you're like, they're just variables, they're like, oh, I get that. So
it's the font versus typeface thing. Like,
it's a nuanced thing.
And you're technically correct or incorrect, but also like you'll just sound like kind of a pompous jerk if all the time you're like, excuse me, do you mean custom properties?
So I don't know about you, but this is how I like to break my projects down. When I'm writing a fresh like theme, I have something that normalizes my CSS code across browsers. And there's been debate like whether we still need to do this or not.
I was literally about to start that debate. I was like, I want to hear your thoughts on the normalizer because I've dropped normalizer files in my code. Completely.
Okay. So there's still things in Safari that render differently than other browsers.
Just a few though. And they're moving
things such as like buttons and radios, I think, are the main ones.
Radios, yeah. Some of that stuff, I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of those things get lumped in. It's mostly those form inputs, right? Like your calendars, your radios, your color pickers. Those are all going to be different by a browser just because they all have different opinions on how it's supposed to look. There's no standardizing that. I think we just got to wash your hands of it and let it go. Some of it like buttons and stuff, yeah. But
I mean, maybe they don't belong in their own file, but I think you're still going to run into like things that don't look right across browsers at some point, and you're going to end up putting that code somewhere. And we could look at my normalized, like I stole this from people on the interwebs. So this isn't original code, but this is like the latest. Usually I have an attribution somewhere in here. I must have accidentally cut it out, but this was like the latest from some important person.
Yeah, there are still a few. I feel like I saw you had the like sub and sup in there, and I feel like those are big ones that I'm still always correcting, is the alignment of superscripts and subscripts. But honestly, it's become so minimal that I just do like an as needed.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I was kind of saying. Like the code's going to end up going somewhere. So like these could go in my buttons file,
But you
like
might
whatever.
not need all of this.
I haven't tested it. I haven't tested it. I'll be honest, I haven't tested it, but there's like this one makes me think that if there's a button, there's some padding or something on Safari or some weirdness that I need to normalize. But these could go in their specific like button file or the subscript stuff. This could go in the next file that I was going to point out, which is my type base. So I throw like type stuff in its own thing here. And I kind of set like the font hierarchy up as variables inside of that file.
Okay.
So I have kind of a typography file here. It's just paragraphs and headings mostly. Like that's how I break things down. So like some of the normalized stuff could probably go in there safely and live happy in this folder or file. So I might not need that file anymore. It's just basically habit at this point, I guess.
So I think everyone's still pretty divided on it. So I would not be surprised if I don't know that I have like the right answer. Just that personally, I've started moving away from starting with like normalized files used to be huge too.
Oh yeah.
This one's not, but it felt eventually like, oh, we're adding all this code. We really don't need it anymore. So I just kind of dropped it and started looking at what I've actually built and kind of saying, do I need to fix something? And then adding in code specific to that. Feels starting to fight.
Not really. So like he's asking which is the best front end. The best front end is the one that you're most efficient with.
Yeah.
If you write code extremely fast in Angular, don't know how that happens, but if that's what you do and you're good at it, then go for it. Some people love their Angular. Just ask Alyssa. She's a big fan. So
she does love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, they all have different perks and drawbacks, but I think ultimately my thing with this, here's my little soapbox rant, is that it's rare, I think, for individual contributors to be in the position where they get to make the choice. Most of us are coding at a company or on a legacy app that has already existed, and we don't actually make the choice about which front-end framework to use. So you learn what you learn. If you're building something from the ground up, then yeah, maybe, I guess, if you're really interested in figuring out if that kind of stuff, that kind of comparison lights you up, then yeah. But mostly, you're probably going to code with what you already learned to code for the last job you had or your day job if you're on a side project or something. Like,
yeah, like some jobs or some positions you might be into, you go where the fires are. Like I had some time doing that too. It's like, today you're going to write VBS. I'm like, oh, really? VB script? Like that's still a thing? Yeah, this one person has to use IE5 in this VBS application. And I'm like, oh, ouch, this is going to burn. So
yeah, that's always been my opinion, is that I write what people pay me to write.
There you go. I go where the money is.
I go where the money. I wrote React for a few years, took a job writing Angular for a year or so, jumped back over here to write some more React.
There you go. So once I get past like these two things, generally it's like components, or not components, but for lack of a better term, components, like highlight.js I'm using in here for like highlighting the code that you see in the presentation.
No, not again. Not again. For those of you that might have missed it, last time Ed and I tried to do this stream, it was about 2 weeks ago, and we got on and we talked for, it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and we hadn't even gotten into anything code related. We were just like, hello, good morning, how are you? We were like shooting the breeze about coffee or something. And then Ed froze for like a solid 30 seconds and then dropped entirely, and the internet had gone out at his house. So the fact that we planned this, rescheduled, got back on 2 weeks later, and it happened again is honestly incredible. What are the chances? So I'm going to hang out here with y'all, lovely chat, for another a few minutes, and we'll see if Ed jumps back on or if I get a text. I'll probably at some point get a text from Ed that's like, I'm trying. So y'all just hang out with me. Tell me what you. I'm gonna look at the chat. What we got? Team Jacob. I never read the Twilight books. I skipped that. I think I was like just past it age-wise ever so slightly. So I missed that boat. Sorry. Give me another. Give me a pop culture question from like 3 to 5 years earlier. I'll have an opinion. Let's talk LCH. What? I don't know what LCH stands for. Clue me in. We'll talk. I'm down to talk whatever we can. Ed's back.
It just threw me like completely out of the stream for no reason.
Oh my god!
At least it wasn't a power or internet outage again, right? That's what happened last time. I don't know where I left off, but
the chat was throwing me questions to
good.
Kill time LCH. I do know what LCH stands for now that you've prompted my. No, you were correct. Fuel, because he was like, let's talk LCH, but it came after Team Jacob or Team Edward, and so I was thinking like pop culture stuff, and I was trying to come up with like a TV show or like a book or something that LCH stood for, but he's talking about actual CSS, the new color standards, the P3 colors, and my brain did not make that jump.
I guess I left off talking about highlight JS. Like this is I think this is where I might have got kicked out of the show here. I was trying to zoom in on this. I must have fat fingered some sort of hotkey. But I was trying to zoom in here. Like that is the style sheet for this. And that is like a third-party thing that I brought in. So it gets globalized. It's not a Blazor component, so it's not in any kind of scoped CSS thing. And then the next thing I'm typically have in here, and you may frown upon this, and it's okay if you do, because I do, but I do it anyway. So I have a file here that is just called refactor. It may even be called refactor me, like that. And it's literally a junk drawer for anything that I'm currently working on that I don't know where it belongs yet.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I was nervous when you started that sentence, but I like that better than it getting all up into your other CSS files, which is, I mean, the only alternative, right, is that you write something that you know you're not happy with, and it's just there.
There's usually some passive aggressive comment in that file too. Like if you're committing this to GitHub, then you suck. Like nothing should be in there once you finally like do a commit. Like it belongs somewhere. What it avoids me from doing though is going to the bottom of this file and like coding at the bottom of my main entry point.
Just like a bunch of junk there with a bunch of like comments above it.
Yeah. So it saves me in the long run. It shames me into doing the right thing too. So
no, I think that's smart. Frankly, I want to go out there and say there's nothing harder than refactoring CSS when it's gotten to be bad. It's a fight.
I have a fun story that goes with this kind of idea. If I can find my presentation I used to give on it, it has some fun visuals in there. Let me see if I can find it really quick, because it's a really like fun true story that happened. Browse. I've got so many presentations. Jesus. When you do this for like 10 years, you start getting this back catalog of stuff.
I believe it.
Where did it go? I know it's in here.
See, this is when he was like, I was on Twitter talking about my Notion. You were like, I just throw everything into a folder.
I do. You're like, witnessing it. No. Like, this is really it. Here we go. I've got it. But I found it. See, that's what search is for. I don't need to organize anything. I have search.
Like a full body shudder as you said that.
So when I first started using Sass, like Sass was like first came out, I came out with this talk. And this is the intro for it. And this is a true story and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to tell it like again and again and again. Like I love old man stories. So back in the day, if I get this on the right screen, like full screen, so you guys can actually see it.
No, I want to see your speaker notes. I want to see how the sausage is made.
Or the chicken sandwich is made. This is a true story, okay? And this reminds me so much of like how people did CSS code and probably still do. Ouch. Even though this is like 10 years ago, but yeah. So back in the day, I worked like in a factory, right? This was 1990 something. So I'm working in this factory, like 96, I think, 95. And like the idea of a food truck now is like this glam, like hipster thing that shows up with great food to eat. Back then, that was not a thing. That was not the meme of a food truck. It was quite the opposite. Like they literally called them roach coaches for good reason. Like this thing would show up, it was very like stainless steel clad vehicle would show up, looks like a Brinks truck with a window, and it's not very appetizing when it gets there. And day one, like everybody goes out of the factory at lunch and the roach coach is there and they have chicken. It's like, a big throwaway pan of like steamed chicken breasts. Yum, right? It gets better. It's day two. We're like, all right, we had chicken yesterday. We still have chicken left over. Yeah. We're gonna put that chicken on a bun. And today we have chicken sandwiches.
Oh man, not even turning into chicken salad or anything. Just straight up.
Well, I mean, if you go straight to chicken salad, you miss day 3.
Oh no. Oh no.
You skip a day. So if you got to go chicken sandwich first, then you can have the chicken salad sandwich on day 3, right?
Yeah.
Day 4. That's when things start getting a little scary. They literally, and I'm not kidding you, took a Sharpie, struck through the word salad, took the chicken off the sandwich, chopped it up, added salsa to, it was already chopped up, added salsa to the chicken salad portion of the sandwich.
Oh no.
Put it back on the sandwich, scratched through the label, wrote salsa above salad. I'm not kidding. This is real. After day 4, I didn't even bother going outside to look, see what the hell was going on, because it was Friday and I figured they're just serving food poisoning at that point, right?
Yeah.
So like this is like literally what we do with CSS. We're like, okay, this is our menu today. We have chicken, and then right below that or somewhere down at the bottom of that same file, you're like, okay, today we're gonna add this to it, and then these things start getting overridden. Just because cascading, this is how it works. And then, by the end of this, we have food poisoning. And somewhere at the bottom of the file, like somebody's got fed up with their code not working and they just slap important over it.
Yes.
I know that's a long story, but.
No, that's I love that actually. That's that's accurate.
It's very accurate and very true, which is sad. At least things have modernized. Like we have SaaS and we have hipsters that run food trucks now.
Yeah, better all around. I can't tell if I'm proud or disgusted that I guessed the chicken salad.
I know. you were like right on top of that one. Have you worked in a food truck before?
No, but I totally need to mix up my own home leftovers game. I feel like the fact that I'm keeping pace with the gross food truck in the way that I handle chicken leftovers is probably just a terrible sign.
Yeah. So the avoiding like the important at the bottom of the page starts with like organizing at the top of the page. Like if you have things that people can go to and go, oh, buttons belong there. This is where the errors live. Let's go there and edit. Then at the very like worst condition, you go into one of those files and at the bottom, there may be some food poisoning at the bottom of that page, but at least it's manageable. Like somebody that knows what they're doing can go in and fix it.
So on this note, I want to ask in the chat, Napalm said they love using BEM. BEM changed my CSS life. What are your thoughts on any object-oriented CSS, any of these kind of CSS organizing methodologies that people use?
So I've never found a need for something that complex, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for people that have run into like scenarios where they have this huge unmanageable style sheet that they need some sort of naming conventions to make it palatable. Organizing things, I mean, like, I think there's simple things that we can do that are more on the lower end of the learning curve that will solve a lot of, like, it's like the 80-20 rule. It's like, this is going to solve like 80% of your problems. Yeah. And then if you're still like struggling with things being organized, like those BEM and some of the other like methodologies probably will fill in that other 20% and make you happy. And that's okay. I think you throw that at a team that's already struggling with CSS, that's just going to probably kill them.
That's fair.
What are your thoughts?
I'm torn. I think for most situations, they tend to be kind of overkill. So kind of the same that you were talking about, like, but I worked on one team that was a huge code base, and the CSS was a nightmare spaghetti code. It was the worst thing I've ever tried to untangle and refactor. Food poisoning to the max. And we ended up adopting the object-oriented CSS model, and that helped a lot because I think it worked specifically because the object-oriented thing is something that our more back-end oriented developers understood. That was kind of speaking the same language, and so that adopting that worked really well in terms of helping to try and organize the nightmare CSS. But I don't think it's something that I would recommend for a team that knows how to write okay CSS anyway.
I agree. Yeah, that's about where I'm at too. So we're pretty in agreement there. So there's some things that you can do also with, depending what the framework is, like all of the modern JavaScript frameworks have some sort of isolation feature. And that also supersedes like the BEM methodologies and stuff, because it's again giving you something that's already doing that task.
Yeah.
So it's already isolating some things. It's making it easier to organize. So you kind of end up doubling up on it. The same rule applies to like coding as well. Like I favor like functional style code. Like I think functional programming helps solve a lot of problems. But if I'm working on a team that's not a bunch of functional minded folks, like, and I start throwing functional code in there, there's going to be some unhappy people with me. So you have to like choose your battles, right?
I do love that this is basically the same answer that we gave to the framework question.
Yeah. We're playing politics today.
We really are. Which is best? I don't know. It depends. What do you like? No, I do think that's valid. You rate what your team is best equipped to write, because that's what will set them up for success.
I'm going to go somewhere opinionated. I think everybody should have a root with variables.
I agree.
Yeah, this is not an optional thing for me anymore. This is the way it needs to happen. This is where...
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying, this is where you should define your base style sheet, and then or variables for that theme, and then go from there.
I think this is especially good for teams that are working with designers, with a design team, because these variables or custom properties, whatever you want to, whether you're using Sass or vanilla, will map almost directly to design tokens in a software like Figma. So it gives you that like almost direct parity that we don't get in a lot of other places. But yeah, you can define your spacing, define your fonts, define your colors, all of that kind of stuff will move over almost one-to-one from the way a design file is organized. And it creates a really good kind of stable ground to build on, where both parties are completely on the same page.
And I'm going to say, if you can get away with CSS properties versus Sass variables to use the CSS properties first.
Always start. That's my opinion on everything. Is always start with what's built in and add on libraries if you need them. Because every dependency you add is a vulnerability in your application.
What's nice about these is you can scope them too. We were talking a little bit about scope earlier. So like root is like global, like this is my global scope. But down inside of your individual files and your components, you can scope those down further. Yeah. And one thing that blew my mind is I didn't know that CSS properties, custom properties, had defaults. And I use that all the time now. So when you write a default value, it's literally like this, like, okay, my prop, and then you're going to use some variable here, and it might be, you might be setting this explicitly to a color or something, or sorry, no, I'm going to use a variable. I need a variable here. Some var, and then the default is going to be some very specific thing. So if somebody doesn't set some variable, then this custom property will default to black. And this is really cool.
Calling you out in the chat.
Ages ago, I don't remember that. I don't. But I will take your word for it. I'm sure there's a stream out there that archived and proves to your point.
That is the trouble with DevRel. Or with live streaming, I guess, just in general.
Yeah.
Too many.
I'm glad I don't live stream everything, because my wife would totally use that against me all the time. She'd be like, I told you. And I'd be like, you never told me. And she'd be like, just watch this Twitch recording. And I'd be like, damn it. Lost again. I believe she has her own internal recording, but
she's just getting those little clips to send to you. Like, no, I saw exactly when this happened.
So like I use the scoping stuff with components. I think this idea works really well. If I could find, there we go. So what you can do is you can set up a scope with, okay, this is my public or global variable. So I have I literally call it out public here just to kind of relate to like a language like C#. So C# has a keyword of public. So like this is public to everybody. This property color is in the public namespace. It's blue. The component scope has a private color, and it's going to look for the public color. If it doesn't find one, it's going to default to white.
Yep.
And then you can even override it further. You can give it more specificity by setting it at the element level and then using the private color there. Or you can override it inline. So you'd use it here. You can override it as an inline style. And this is another one of those things you see like come full circle, is like never use an inline style. Inline styles are evil.
I was fighting back. You were like, and you could do it inline. I was like,
The nice thing here is it's an inline style that sounds icky, but it's setting a variable.
That's better, but yeah, I struggle. I mean, inline styles occasionally, I think they are a necessary evil. But my main grump with inline styles, they're not where, if you're a developer that is new to a code base and you're looking for styles, you're going to look in CSS files. You're going to troubleshoot your way through a CSS file most of the time before you go think to parse through individual inline styles. And so those things can live outside of refactors or whatever. And I think that's a big part of how you get that food poisoning, is that someone goes through a whole CSS file, can't find where this thing is being set, overrides it, or tries to, throws importance on stuff, and you end up with something icky.
I generally wouldn't hard code this though. This would be something that's being controlled by a variable. So this is something that's being set at runtime.
Yeah. It is better with a variable.
Yeah. What's nice about this being set at runtime using a CSS property versus just like concatenating like an entire style here is this variable could be used in multiple places. So if I call whatever this color is orange, the orange might apply to like the background, the border, you know, some text that's there. Yeah, it could be used in many different ways other than, you know, just setting background color orange. It might be more than just background color.
No, I agree. I think
so when you do it programmatically, you can do this. So this, it will make this guy bigger first, and then we can, this guy changes completely dynamically. And notice I'm inverting the color for the text with it as well.
That is quite nice.
So this scoping is pretty cool. I like that.
Yes.
What's nice here too is if I don't specify the root, it doesn't break because the default takes over. So I can take these out. Like if I don't want people to necessarily override this, but I still want to have like future-proof code that I may want to come back in and overwrite it later at a global level. But you know, if I delete this out of the code or comment it out,
you'll still get the fallback.
Yeah, you still have the ability to change it later, even though you're not utilizing it today. I think that's pretty neat. So yeah, that's my little spiel on properties and scope and variables. I think it's pretty cool.
It is.
The entire thing that's the presentation here is built with pretty much CSS Grid. Like some people are like hardcore Flexbox all the time. Everything's a Flexbox. And then
you just say people, Alyssa.
Yeah. Alyssa.
Alyssa is ride or die Flexbox.
Yeah. Some people are all grid. And I'm, again, like right down the middle. It's like when I need it, I use it. Cool.
I use both.
I think grid is amazing, though. And I probably abuse it sometimes. One of those abuses is on this screen here. So there's quite a few grids going on in this layout. And you can see like there's grids inside of grids. One thing that's really cool is you can apply them to something like a list item.
Yeah.
And anything you put in it will conform to that grid. And it includes like pseudo elements that are in it as well. So it's really a cool thing you can kind of utilize at the element level. And you can overlap.
Yes. That's, I think, probably one of the major selling points. That's probably one of the biggest differentiators, really, between Flexbox and Grid, is that Flexbox is very inherently meant to work within the existing structure, and Grid lets you do some of that interesting overlapping and kind of adding of dimension. It works more like a native design grid would work.
Yeah, right? Like you can do like magazine style layouts now and not have to create like 10,000 lines of CSS code to make something simple happen. One of the examples is in here, and oh wow, I just lost a monitor. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you, but you did freeze.
You can hear me?
I'm
literally frozen up. Like it's starting to come back, I think.
Yeah, I can
what
see
the
that.
heck was that all about?
You were frozen.
I'm still one monitor down. I am still one monitor down. Like
that's so weird.
Hang on a second. Try to reboot this monitor. Yeah, I've got I can see my screen on my second monitor. My primary monitor is black.
Blazor Mr. Magoo says you overloaded the grid.
There we go.
Too much CSS.
Now it's back. That was weird.
That's weird.
Yeah. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh yeah, overlaying on this. I wonder if my graphics driver crashed or something because I was trying to zoom and the zoom tool might have caused some problems. But the overlap here is like there's a grid. There's a grid that breaks up the colors in this page.
Okay.
So there's a grid box here, here, and then the white space here. And then there's another element that in itself is a grid, but it overlaps the orange column like that. So there's an overlap here between these two grids. And back in before CSS Grid, you had to do like negative margins to get stuff like this to work.
Nightmare. Yeah, and then God forbid you had to resize anything that you set a negative margin on. That was that was miserable.
And it would still calculate like the total page width and height without that negative, like it wouldn't subtract the margin out of it. So you'd get weird calculations on things. And one of them is, I think, still on my website. So I use a negative margin on my website. And I have a grid version of this I haven't deployed, but there's a negative margin up here. And its sole purpose is so I can have this notch cut out right there. And I redid this in CSS Grid, and it's much, much easier to work with. And it's like way less code than what I had to do to negative margin this thing up here.
Or, the notch is very Apple here. Of you, you know.
Yeah, I hate phones with notches. So the page itself is actually negative, like so many pixels into this space here.
Right.
So this can overlap on top. And there was an issue with like the scroll, because like even though the page didn't need to scroll because it was within the the browser window, it would have like this negative
tiny scroll bar.
Yeah, it would still like show up, and there'd be like this empty space at the bottom. It was so weird and annoying. And I don't remember how I fixed it, but it was like a lot of CSS code to just go, don't show a scroll bar when the page fits and you have this empty white space at the bottom. So there's like some calc thing going on in there to fix it. It's annoying. I probably need to redeploy.
I'm impressed with your website. I just gave up on the idea that I would ever actually maintain mine, and it's literally like just plain HTML and CSS. It's just like it's like a text document. I just gave up.
Cobbler's shoes or some analogy.
It's very like 1995.
Well, I mean, mine is like 2022, 2020. Yeah, there we go. I got 2 posts in for the year, and they're both literally the same thing. Like I'm trying to get my resources for my talks up on my website. So instead of like listing like 10 links at the end of my presentations, you get 1, and then you go to that link and there's everything for you. So you can just get right on there and link off to everything. And some of them have recordings and stuff, which is nice. But
yeah, I just moved over to like a third party. I'm using Polywork for all my like blogs and talks and stuff. My website just points to that. It's like, go look over there. Sorry.
Mine's on GitHub. So it's like a Jekyll thing that every time I pave a machine, I have to relearn how to make it work. And every time I install it, it's like, you need this version that's like 5 versions old because reasons. And it's like, okay. And I end up with like 3 versions of Ruby that are yelling at each other. And I always have to really relearn like why you have to go 3 versions back instead of using the latest one, and how to uninstall all the crap that came with it by default.
So websites were a mistake.
They are. I should just put it all in a Word document and share it.
Yes, that's the future.
But at least I haven't redesigned it in like a long time. Like
it's The temptation is eternal. Yeah.
Somebody tweeted the other day. It was so funny. It was like, I want to write a new blog post, but like got to redesign like my entire website first.
Yes.
But, just to make like one blog post every year.
Absolutely.
That's about where I was at with this stuff.
There's no stronger. Yeah. There's nothing like procrastinating on another project to get you to redesign your personal website.
I think this is, I'm trying to remember if this is my CSS Grid version or not. It's been a while since no, this is not my grid. Like I'm using some old bootstrappy thing to make this work. But I have a new version that's all CSS Grid, and the themes are all based off of, there's no Sass at all. And what's cool is you can change like the color palette, and the entire thing will change with it, just off of CSS variables. So you could go right into the browser and hack the variable, and it will like in real time change the entire look and feel of it. But I've never actually
but then you
deployed
have your signature brand colors.
I know.
How will I know it's you if it's not orange and blue?
Exactly. It drives my wife nuts. She loves it though. Like she buys me, like you can't see the rest of my office. She buys me stuff all the time. And we recently did our deck in the same theme. So it all goes with the whole DevRel thing, I promise. It's a long story.
Oh no.
It's a long story. You can see like I closed it already. Like this is how obnoxious I am. Like in the background, my slides are literally the same theme as the rest of the page. It's an obsession.
So you're telling me another couple of years of this, and I'll have signature colors as well.
You should.
It's inevitable.
This is how hopefully people remember things. Like that's all about, I have a very long last name that nobody can remember or spell. So some folks do like, I have some people that I know that have done this type of stuff for a while. One of them is Steve Smith. Fantastic speaker. Try to Google Steve Smith.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a major branding issue here when your name is literally like the most common first name and last name is your entire name. So Steve goes by R. Dallas, and that's kind of his branded like name that alias you'll find him on. And I was like, all right, I have the super long last name. I don't have that problem, but people have a hard time remembering like personalities, names, things like that. I was like, I'm going to stick with the guy that had the orange and blue stuff. Like that's the guy. Like we'll go find him. So hopefully it sticks. But yeah, it's kind of bled into everything.
I solved that problem for myself by getting married and tacking on someone else's last name to mine. I had complete Google anonymity growing up because there's a movie star from the 40s named Kathryn Grayson who spells it exactly the same way. If you Google Kathryn Grayson, that's what you find. And it wasn't until I added on Nanz that I became findable at all.
There was somebody that was a speaker, I think. And no, actually it was an attendee I met at a conference. And we were talking about this, and she said, yeah, you're lucky like that, your name is unique and there's nothing negative associated with it. She's like, if you Google my name, it comes up as a woman who murdered her husband. And like, it's like in every newspaper, like, especially if, it's a local search. And if you Google her name, like this mugshot of a completely different person comes up, and the story about how she murdered her husband. And she's like, do you know how hard it is to find a date as a single mother when you Google my name and that's the headline that comes up? And I was like, yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
That's gotta hurt. So one thing that we need to chat about, and we're probably running out of time today to do it, so we'll have to do it offline. I don't believe this is responsive. I don't remember if I didn't get to the responsive part yet.
Yeah.
So the intention here was to do a slide deck, so it's very desktop-y. And
at least it doesn't break. Like it could probably be, you probably want it to stack, right? Is what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I guess your code kind of overflows.
Yeah, some stuff, like, let's see if I've got, and this is very wordy, so it's gonna, it's still,
It's not ideal, but it works. It doesn't break the whole thing, so.
Yeah. Actually, let's look at this one, see what this does. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, okay.
That's a total disaster. And for me, like, I'm still in the habit of, let's just slap some media queries in there and just fix it that way. And I know you've got some new techniques that you use to do like responsive stuff. Like, what's that all about?
Well, you've already got, I mean, some of the biggest two, right, are Flexboxing Grid and just knowing how to use Flexboxing Grid. I won't go into those because, yeah, duh, and we've already talked about them a lot. But otherwise, I think it's really just from the mental model of breakpoints, right? Because so much of us kind of dealt with that like heavy bootstrap era, right? Where breakpoints were really built in and you would like hit a line and this idea of like here and then snap, you know, and the whole kind of website would change. Once we step away from that and start thinking about things kind of gradually moving and rearranging as needed to fit the available space, no matter what the space is, then we kind of get into some of these, like you pulled up min-max. Calc is also really great. All kinds of like percentage-based stuff, things that let you set ranges right in the CSS without needing to set your ranges around breakpoints.
So I know like the percentages and pixel values can get tricky with CSS Grid. So you have to show me some tricks there, because the last time I tried to use a percentage with CSS Grid, it totally borked it.
You really just have to be intentional about setting percentages only on kind of your child elements, right? Because once you don't want to be setting percentages on the parts of the grid that are doing the grid structure, because that'll throw you off.
That does bad things. Like,
because then
I'm trying to remember what it did. It throws off the FR values. I think. So you get things that break outside of the grid container unintentionally.
Because the percentage will kind of overwrite. It'll take that priority over the kind of grid structure. It's assuming you're saying, no, break out of the grid and do this instead. And so it'll kind of bork your whole thing. But I think it's great to set percentage values for kind of the children that you have inside a specific grid element. Because then as your grid shifts, your child elements can shift based on whatever the parent is. And you don't have to know what a hard value is or anything. So it can kind of flex. I hate to say flex to describe grid, but the element can flex to fill the space, and you don't need to be aware of the actual pixel value.
It looks like container queries are coming along too.
I don't know enough about those yet because they haven't finalized, but they're getting close.
It's getting really close, and they're able to do more than query size is what's interesting.
Have you? Oh. I'm gonna throw us off. Have you seen the new has selector, pseudo selector?
Yes.
I'm so excited.
I have seen it. I have not used it. There's a couple like semantics that go with it too, that change the specificity of it. And you know who's actually really good at talking about that is Chris DeMars. He's really knowledgeable of the keywords. There's has with, like not with a D, like, but with.
Yeah, with literally as, like in addition to, with this.
Yeah. There's 4 of them in total, and I can't remember all of them. And like one is like the polar opposite of the other. And there's 2 pairs of things.
And then not, I think.
Let's see.
They're has literally just hit Chromium browser acceptance. So like it is
there's
new
has and
as
not.
of like a week ago.
The other one I saw it come up as I searched is and where.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are very similar, but they do opposite things. Yeah, so those are things that I still need to learn a little bit more. So like I think is and where have different specificities. So like one will override when the other one doesn't. And I can't remember which is which.
Yeah, I'm not as up on is and where personally.
Difference between where and is that where always has a 0 specificity, whereas is takes on the specificity of the most specific selector. Boy, this is a mouthful in its arguments.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are newer things I haven't really used yet, but I know of them. If I saw them, I'd probably be able to figure out what they're doing, but that's about it. I haven't quite used them yet.
I've been all hyped up on has because that is our first like parent selector in CSS. We've never been able to kind of say like this and go up, you know, and that's been something people have asked for a long time.
I did not realize that's what it did.
Has lets you do that. It does more than that. So I think they're saying like it's a relationship based selector. I forget what the way that they're describing it, because it does, in addition to that, some other things. But it's very interesting. It is the first one that allows us to select up, to move up the cascade, which is wild.
Trying to figure out where the article was I bookmarked for the container queries. I think I found it. Yeah, CSS style queries. This is really cool. Have not used this either. You can container like query the width, but you can also query like the color. It was like, okay, if this card is inside of a style that has the color purple, then do something specific with it. I'm like, that opens up a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
So you can actually like query properties of the container other than just width, pretty much any property it looks like, and do things based on the container. So that could be really helpful with like getting the opposite, like contrasting color maybe. That's been
So I could see that. I'm trying to think through, like, I feel like that one's also got, it would be easy to get yourself into a situation with container queries.
Yeah, it could you could get that food poisoning real quick, right?
Yeah, that's because right, like the idea of targeting by color is really cool until you decide to rebrand or something, and then all of a sudden you're targeting, unless you've done a really good job with like your variables or something. Yeah,
it's doing the thing again. It lost my theme. Like it's just for today's show, it's just gonna randomly lose my theme. Like what the heck is it doing?
Well, we're probably pretty close to done anyway. So
yeah, I was just gonna show. Are you kidding me? Wow.
Oh no.
It literally did this again. Let's delete the CSS file and regenerate it and see if that does it again. I was going to show how I did color contrast. No, I'm not going to show it because it's literally not going to work now.
Universe says no.
What? Are you serious? No. Here, let's do this one. Let's try.
Oh man.
Firefox? No, it doesn't exist in Firefox either. Wow, it's completely. I did nothing different.
Demo says go home. You're done here.
Your time is over. You are done.
That was the code equivalent of like getting the hook at the variety show.
It literally didn't do anything. It didn't change the app at all. Like, it won't load either. I just noticed it's not running. Now it's running for no reason.
There it is.
Just decided it's going to run. This demo that I did here, there was a little bit of code magic behind getting the opposite color. It's still kind of tricky in CSS to get like the opposite color from a CSS value. Like,
yeah,
I want the polar opposite on the color wheel. Like,
it's just not how hex codes are organized.
Yeah. So there's some trickery involved in this one. So I'll show that before we go here. But if I
that
go
will
in,
get easier with some of the new color models that are coming. So get that for you at least soon.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to remember where the code existed. That is not it. Now I gotta remember where it's at. It should be. This is a bubble, and then I'm setting the color from. Oh, it's probably on the page. The page is controlling the color, not the component. So if I go to the slide on CSS properties, no, that is not the one. Oh, shoot. I got to look at the
yeah, so that one I think is it.
So it's going to be labeled scope. There we go, scope. So what I did here is, since I'm able to control it programmatically, remember I'm using that inline style that I was talking about, and we were both kind of like cringe, but it does have a value in here. I'm using the inline style at the component level, and I'm just passing the value of the background color and the foreground color to the component, which then render it as an inline style. But I had to write code to get the hex code, translate it to, from a string into actual hex code. So convert it into a small int at base 16, and then shift register in all Fs, which inverts the register, and then get the output of that and render that back into a string.
That's bananas. You know that, right?
That is super annoying. Why is this not a CSS function? Why?
Soon. I think is actually the right answer. Yeah, I mean, it just has to do with the way that we have traditionally organized colors. And you might, like, I don't know if you'd have an easier go of it with like RGB colors, but when you have those kinds of color structures that are actually specifying the numerical values, they are more accurately like representing where things are placed on the wheel and where that would be in a color picker, as opposed to hex codes, which
shouldn't need computer science
behind them that are insane.
There's shouldn't need a computer science degree to change the color code.
Yeah, there's a really great article I need to find somewhere about a developer who, I can't remember if he was colorblind or just blind, visually impaired entirely, and had learned like how the hex colors worked so that he could look at a hex code and know what color it would be, because each part of it means something specific. And so he was like, yeah, I just gave up on like trying to place colors and guess at colors. I figured out what they would be and was like, all right, this will be blue, this will be green. And he could just read them, which was wild. It's so cool.
Smab UK asks, does invert work? Invert works, but only at an image, I think. Image level, right? Is that how
I think that's like a
works?
filter type situation,
yeah,
right?
If you can filter like an image based on invert, but I don't know if you can invert a specific CSS color and get a value from it.
I've never been in a situation where I just wanted to programmatically invert a color, like without seeing or choosing the color personally.
Yeah, I was like, I always want this to be the polar opposite because it needs to contrast. I want the most contrasting color here. Well, and I looked.
But sorry, I'm like design nerding out. I'm like, that's not necessarily how contrast works though, right?
No, but this is going to be a close automation as I can get.
It's okay.
It's this was like I could let the user choose 2 colors, but then like at least I could offer them a suggestion at this point, right? It doesn't need to magically set it like it's doing here, but I can at least like say, well, this is going to be the, you know, a contrasting color on the palette, right?
Yeah. So I think it's neat. But yeah, if you were trying to like automatically make something accessible or readable by choosing an inverted color in this way, that just wouldn't quite cut the.
Yeah, it's not 100%, but it does a pretty decent job. So it grabs the opposite, and it's really interesting the way it works though. Like I understand exactly what's happening with the bits here, and I think it's neat, but it's so annoying at the same time because there's literally no way in CSS code to say like I want a variable that is like some function of this color.
Mm-hmm.
And just give me the opposite. Like there's nothing to do that. There isn't Sass
use case as you think it is.
I know maybe not the opposite, but there's not a lot of color.
There's not a lot of color manipulation.
Yeah, at all. And there's good reason for color manipulation. If you want to say, like, give me a theme based on this color I chose, and it just gives you the entire theme for your entire app based on that color.
Yeah,
I think that is a valid thing, right?
And I think Sass does a better job of that, right? They've got some of the like lighter, darker kind of stuff that helps a lot. Again, it seems lame to be like, we're getting there. Like, I promise we're getting there. But yeah, like Blazor, Mr. Magoo is thrown in there.
And like, that I use on my prototype version of my personal website.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good example that he gave. I think I actually used that. So you can do it, but you have to define all of your colors using HSL. You cannot use hex code.
No, you cannot use hex code. And I think that we're going to move away from using hex code in the near future.
Oh, well.
That's its own soapbox rant. But hex and RGB, I think, are on their way out. We're getting much better methods of defining color.
Let's see if I can find this here. GitHub. So I have, I want to say this is my demo site that I created. Let's see if it actually opens.
I like this. In 10 years, there will be a retro RGB movement. Like people that want to release stuff on cassette now.
So this is the prototype version of my website. And I use exactly what Mr. Magoo's talking about in here. If I open up, I think I just click on anything, it'll show up, right? Styles, please. Yeah,
probably.
There's the definitions for the colors.
Mm-hmm.
And this HSL, like you literally have to define each value of it as a variable in order to change the color. So now you're not talking about one color, you're talking about 3 for each one color. There's 3 definitions for each one color. So
but that's what gives you that fine-tuned manipulation, the ability to invert, because you have granular control.
So I could come into one of these colors and boom, you see it immediately went to gray.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, this is the S value. This is the shade. Is that what it is? Shade?
Saturation.
Saturation. Yeah, that's hue, saturation, lightness. That's right.
Yes.
Hue, saturation, lightness. So desaturate it, change the brightness of it, that sort of thing. But I can never remember like how to actually get, I guess the hue is going to change the color completely. That's the one I should have been messing with.
Yeah. So yeah, but that lets you run, right? Because I mean, contrast is effectively most of what it comes down to is the lightness value, right? Is that you want something with a far enough difference in your lightness. And then if you want to swap the hue or you want to swap the saturation, you know, those things have an impact on the value. But
what's cool about it is once I change that color, everything that uses that CSS property then changes color with it. So I changed one value, and on the button, the hover, the border, all of it changed with that value because you can calculate it, and you could do it at runtime. So if for some reason you wanted somebody to be able to like pick their own theme for something, they could just be like, this is my favorite color, and the whole app gets based on it. And actually, like, legitimate use case. Okay, let's talk about one of those. Say you have a photo app and you want to use like machine learning to pick out somebody's favorite or the prominent color, say like this orange, out of the photo, and then use that to theme the card that photo's inside of. Like, you can do that.
Yeah.
And that would be really cool. And that's like a legitimate thing you could do. Like some of the material theme stuff tries to do that, like on mobile, like the Google.
Some of that exists without the machine learning. I think they just kind of pick a color from the photo and.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do use some sort of model to pick that, though, because it's they might be able to do it another way by like expecting some values out of that picture, but it's kind of hard. You can run it through like a service that'll do it, like super cheap. You can do that with Azure Cognitive Services. You just throw out a photo and you're like, what's the primary color of this photo? And it's like, this is all the different, it'll give you the hex, it'll give you the HSL, all of it as a service.
Nice.
But yeah, you could do that. But yeah, this was interesting code to have to write. Yeah, so this brings back memories of pun intended, memories, because it's a memory address. Boo. Anybody? Come on.
I'm just not acknowledging it.
Come on, folks. So
I just had the crickets in the chat.
It's like goes back to like binary addition. So you have a register with ones and zeros type of thing, and then you add those two registers together, and then you get the result of those things. And if you want to shift it, then you kind of like do one of those before you add it together, and you actually get the opposite. You negate the values of it. So that's kind of what's going on here. Is like the first problem is it's a string, and you're like, okay, this is the string, but it's missing two of the values, because what you have here is just the color, and it's omitting the transparency values. So it's really this. So what you have to do is take and append that to it. So that's what the first line does. So I'm taking the pound symbol, which is not part of the data, and replacing it with the missing data. So it's just kind of a quick way to do that. It's like, oh, grab that pound symbol, add 2 more Fs there to replace the missing bits. So it's a full 16 bits. And then we're going to take that and convert it to an actual hexadecimal 32-bit integer. And then we're going to add in a complete full, this is the max value. And we're gonna shift that in. So that gives you the opposite. And then when you go back, you have to make sure the string's formatted as a hexadecimal string output. Otherwise, it comes back as some really long number. This X defines in C# that I want the UTF-16 but I want it as hexadecimal. And then you pass that back to your code with, you got to reappend the little $sign in front of it. And that makes it work. And that took forever to get right. I kept running into little quirky things it was doing. So annoyed with it. Now it works. Nice. And I'm still mad at CSS for not having that as a function. At the very least, you should be able to say, hey, CSS, do this. Right there. That's all you should be able to say. Give me, shift this value in hexadecimal by this amount and give me the result. And you can't do that. It's just bonkers that you can't do that. And that's because CSS is not a programming language. Not going to go there. That's not true. I don't believe that. I just wanted to fire people up. And that's because Chris DeMars, that CSS is not a programming language. It very much is. Yes. The fact that you can do a fraction of the things that you can do in CSS, it's definitely a programming language. And it's getting more and more of one.
That's really what I was about to say. Like, I think when people think of CSS, so many developers still think of the CSS of like 10 or 15 years ago. And it's just not that anymore.
That should have been the end of the stream. I should have hit the end broadcast button. Like, you should just smash the end broadcast button. Like, and that's why. Drop the mic. But then people think I believe that, and I don't. So
yeah,
it's still fun to like get people to like, and that's why pineapple belongs on pizza.
See, the trouble is that I agree with you on that one. So can't rile me up. We're on the same team.
We'll close with the latest pizza meme I saw. Like somebody tweeted the other day, they're like, "I'm solving the pineapple on pizza debate for good," and they had like pickles on their pizza. I was like, "Yeah, that's not gonna happen."
I would eat
hot pickles do not belong on pizza.
I don't know. I'd do it. I love pickles.
I like pickles, but they belong on certain things.
Everything.
On hot dogs, they're great.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Relish is one thing, but like just straight like homemade pickles like sliced up on a hot dog is like the best.
Like Chicago style, right?
Yeah, exactly. See what do they do in Boston?
I don't know. We'll have to find out.
They just put chowder. They pour chowder all over the top of the hot dog.
That sounds terrible.
Chowder dog. Here you go.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what Boston like native foods are besides like what Dunkin'.
Clam chowder. It's a big one.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a fan.
I say
Sorry,
that's a
Boston.
no for me, dog.
We will let you all go. We've been rambling on here for an hour 40. So, all right, folks. Take care. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
See ya.